Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We will be learning today, Mirz Hashem, a combination of Daf Lamed Beis, Amud Beis, and I hope to get near to the end of Daf Lamed Gimel, Amud Aleph. We are continuing to learn the halachos of Tisha B'Av. We pick up today on Lamed Beis, Amud Beis, in Siman Taf Kuf Nun Daled, Sif Yud Ches. So as we know, one of the Chamisha Inuyim, one of the 5 ways in which we afflict ourselves on Tisha B'Av as a zecher for the Churban is that marital relations are forbidden. Tashmish Hamita is aser on Tisha B'Av. Therefore, it says the Mechaber in Sif Yud Ches, Yesh mi she'omer. There are those that say, and in the Berurah this is brought down from the Hagos Mordechai, Yesh mi she'omer. There are those that say, Shelo yishan b'leil Tisha B'Av im ishtay b'mita, that a husband and wife should not sleep together in the same bed on Tisha B'Av night. And says the Mechaber v'nachayin hadavar, this is proper, mishum lech amrinan l'nizira, because of the concept that Chazal tell us, lech, go, which is a way of saying go around, amrinan l'nizira. We say to the Nazir, lekarmacha loy sikrav. We tell a Nazir who's not allowed to drink wine, we tell him, go around, don't go into the vineyard. If you know that you have an Issa Daraisa, that you're not allowed to drink wine, don't go into a vineyard, don't go into a liquor store. If you're not allowed to drink wine, stay away from wine. The same concept applies over here. If you know that on Tisha B'Av there's an Isser of Tashmish Hamita as a zecher for the Churban, so then the halacha would be, the Mechaber is saying, that's the reason for the minig, don't sleep together in the same bed. That's only going to bring you to temptation. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cotton lamed zayin. The nachayin hadavar, the Mechaber said that this is proper. V'ayin lekamon simin taf reish tesvav sif aleph. The Mishnah Berurah forward to Hilchas Yom Kippurim, Siman Taf Reish Tesvav and Sif Aleph, where on Yom Kippur you also have an Isser of Tashmish Hamita, and over there it says the Aser Liga Be'ishtoi Ki'ilu Hi Nida, that it is Aser to come into physical contact with your wife as if she was a Nida. We know that in Hilchas Nida we have Harchakos. One of the Isurim by Hilchas Nida, when a man's wife is a Nida, he's not allowed to touch her. So the same thing, that's on by Yom Kippur. And says the Chavetz Chaim here, the Efshir, it's possible to Hu Hadin B'Tisha B'Av that the same halacha would apply on Tisha B'Av. Kain Kasav Hadarke Moshe. He brings this down from the Ramah in the Darke Moshe on the Torah, that together with the Isser of Tashmish Hamita on Tisha B'Av also comes an Isser of physical contact, that it would be improper to touch your wife on Tisha B'Av. However, the Chavetz Chaim says, nevertheless, by Yom yesh lahakil. During the day, there's room to be makel. So at night, Tisha B'Av by night, when that would be the ordinary time for Tashmish Hamita, generally speaking, we don't engage in marital relations during the day, and therefore during the day, there's no great need for that harchaka, because we're not afraid that coming into physical contact is going to lead to anything greater than that. They also bring down, let me see if it's in the Sharet Sion here. Yes, if you take a look at the Sharet Sion, Ois Kot Mem Dalet, the Chavetz Chaim says, the Dafka B'Yom Kippurim, Sha'anashim Mekushatais L'chvayid Hayoim. It's only on Yom Kippur, when the women are generally speaking, they're wearing their Shabbos clothing, so they're Mekushatais, they're dressed up, L'chvayid Hayoim, as a covet for Yom Kippur, V'yesh Lachosh L'giroi Hayetzahara. At that time, it's reasonable to be concerned that the Yetzahara might overtake one. His wife looks all pretty, she's dressed up for Yom Kippur. Masha'ei came b'Tisha B'Av. Now, it's contrast that to Tisha B'Av. Shaholchim b'begadim minuvalim. On Tisha B'Av, we're not supposed to dress up. On Tisha B'Av, you're supposed to dress down. So the way the lashon of the Chavetz Chaim, that you wear begadim minuvalim, you wear repulsive garments. V'em gam b'Tisha B'Av holchim b'kushatais. If it would be true that on Tisha B'Av someone's wife is also dressed up for some reason, which is not proper, yesh lahachmir by af b'yoyim, then it would be reasonable to be machmir even during the day and not to have any physical contact with your wife. K'may b'Yom Kippurim, just as we have that halacha on Yom Kippur. V'ayin b'Siman Tafresh Tesvav b'Taz dehu mitzadid lahakal b'Tisha B'Av b'Negia af b'Layla. The Taz, it seems, was makel even Tisha B'Av at night, and he didn't have this hanhaga, this isser of coming into physical contact, of touching, even by night. V'ulai lo ra darkei Moshe. The Chavetz Chaim suggests that maybe that's because the Taz somehow never saw this darkei Moshe. Okay. Ois Katan Lamed Ches, the Mishnah Berurah says, the Mechaber quoted the Maimer Chazal, Lech Lech Amrinan L'Nazira, and the Chavetz Chaim brings this down in Aramaic, Sechar L'Karma, go around the vineyard, Loi Sikrav, don't come close, Sechar, go around, L'Karma ka Loi Sikrav, to the vineyard, do not approach. Okay, now we go to Sif Yud Tes, says the Mechaber, Imchal Tisha B'Av b'Shabbos. Let's say Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos. Over here, we're not talking about a nidcha. I'm sorry. Over here, we're talking about where Tisha B'Av itself falls out on Shabbos. Imchal Tisha B'Av b'Shabbos. If Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, mutter bekulan. Then all of the chamisha inuyim are mutter. You're allowed to wear shoes. You're allowed to engage in marital relations according to the Mechaber. You're allowed to eat. You're allowed to drink. Sicha is mutter. So Mechal Tisha B'Av b'Shabbos, if Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, mutter b'kulan, all of the chamisha inuyim are mutter. Afilu b'tashmish shamita, and according to the Mechaber, it's even permissible to engage in marital relations. Haga, however, says the Ramah, v'yesh oisrim tashmish shamita. There are those that aser marital relations even on Shabbos when Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos. And the Ramah says v'chein noihagin, and that indeed is our minig. He brings that down from the Torah. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Lamed Tes, mutter bekulan. The Mechaber said when Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, everything is mutter, and the Mechaber said afilu tashmish shamita. Says the Chavetz Chaim, what's the source for this? To ha'isa b'braisa, because we have a braisa brought down in the Tosefta. Umala al shulchanai. You're allowed to set a table. You're allowed to put out a table, a feast on Shabbos, even though it's Tisha B'Av. Kesuda shloima hamelech. Ve'enoi meinei atzmoi mishum davar. And the lashon of the braisa, the Tosefta, is ve'enoi meinei atzmoi mishum davar. He doesn't have to refrain from indulging in anything. So it would appear that even tashmish shamita is mutter. However, v'hayesh oisrim svira lahu, the yesh oisrim, the Ramah that brings down that to forbid marital relations on Shabbos, the yesh oisrim svira lahu, to have a Shabbazu kekarve meisai beregel, that this Shabbos, when Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, that's analogous to somebody who lost a loved one that he's mechuyev to hold avelos for on Yom Tov. What's the din then? The noyeg beregel dvarim shebetzina. The halacha then is that even though we don't show avelus b'farhesia on the regel and we don't keep avelus on Yom Tov, but dvarim shebetzina, if somebody lost chas v'shalom, let's say a parent on Yom Tov, so he doesn't begin the avelus on Yom Tov, but dvarim shebetzina, things that are discreet, things that are private, dvarim shebetzina, he does keep avelus. So, for instance, he wouldn't engage in marital relations on Yom Tov because that's dvarim shebetzina. And if you follow this line of reasoning and you want to aser tashmish shamita on Tisha B'Av shechal liyos b'Shabbos because dvarim shebetzina noyeg, then washing in warm water on Shabbos would also be aser shegam zeh kari tzina, because that's also something that you do privately. It's not b'farhesia. Ois Katan Mem, the Ramah said v'chein noyagin, that indeed it is our minik to forbid marital relations when Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos. And the Chavetz Chaim says, and he brings this down from the Darkei Moshe, Umachriz hashamish dvarim shebetzina noyeg. They had the custom that Friday night after davening, the shamish, the gabbai, would give a clap, and he would announce dvarim shebetzina noyeg, things of a discreet nature. That's the custom to keep noyeg. They are in force. Dvarim shebetzina noyeg, things of a discreet nature are in force. That's a rebez to say you're going home Friday night. Friday night is a time that's brought down in halacha to engage in marital relations, l'kavod Shabbos, but on this Shabbos, when it's Tisha B'Av, dvarim shebetzin noig. Now's not a time for marital relations. The Sharitzion brings down here in Ois Katan Mem Hey, Kain Kosav Darkei Moshe. The Ramah brings this down in the Darkei Moshe on the tour to announce dvarim shebetzin noig. The Nira Li, but the Chavetz Chaim says it appears to him, in a place where they don't have the custom to make the announcement, you should not be makbid to make the announcement. He brings down from the Sefer Halacha Berurah that he argues on the whole minig to make this announcement. And the Chavetz Chaim says, and certainly in our days, where there are jesters, there are litzanim, who make jokes out of everything. So they're going to hear dvarim shebetzina noyeg, they're going to wink at each other. Oh, you know what that's talking about, which is a disgusting thing. Befrat inside, talking about in shul, in the basic nesses, in the Beis Medrash. It brings to mind the Ma'amar Chazal, Hakol Yoidim Kala Labed Nichnasa L'chuppah. And you go to a chasana, everybody knows what the chassan and Kala are going to be doing later that night. But somebody who would sit by a chasana and talk about it, that's a manuvel. And the truth is, like my Rebbe always points out, the truth is, Baruch Hashem, Yidden are Kedoshim, and we don't think that way. You don't see the Kala by the chasana and have such hirhurim to yourself of what's going to be going on. That's because we're Yisrael and Kedoshim, not like the what's walking out in the street nowadays. Okay. Was finding my place again in the Mishnah Berurah. Okay, so starting again in Ois Katan Mem, v'chein noegin, u'machbez hashamish dvarim shebetzin noeg. Achein, nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, even though the Ramah says v'chein noegin, that the minig is that we do not engage in marital relations on Shabbos when it's Tisha B'Av shechal yois b'Shabbos. Achein, nevertheless, im ero leil tfilasa b'Shabbosu, if one's wife is going to the mikvah on that Friday night, then Hevi Magen Avram b'Shem HaShla. Then the Magen Avram quotes the Shla, the Yesh Lismaich Bazeh Al Dea Harishayna, that in that case you could rely on the first opinion, the opinion of the Mechaber here in Ois Katan in Sif Yotes, V'Toveles U'Mishameshes, and she could go to the mikveh Friday night, and they can engage in marital relations Friday night, even though it is Tisha B'Av. However, but there are those who are machmir even in such a case. He sends you to the Chai Adam who writes, the kevan the balel tfilahu mitzvahs oina, since the night when a woman goes to the mikveh, that is a mitzvah to engage in tashmish on that night. That's the mitzvah of oina. Yesh lismarich bazeh al hamatirin. It would be proper to rely on the matirin. V'haramash akasav denayag in leiser. When the Ramah says that our custom is to aser tashmish amita, hainu b'makom she'en kan mitzvahs oina. That's in a typical case where there's no specific mitzvah requirement to engage in marital relations on that night. It's just something that you want to do. Ma she'en ken b'leil tefillah. On the leil tefillah, then it's brought down that it's specifically a mitzvah to engage in marital relations b'leil tefillah, and therefore if it falls out on Friday night in Tisha B'Av, you could rely on the makilim. Ayin sham b'nishmas adam. V'ayin b'bir agra. He also says, take a look at the bir agra. The mashma minei, it's implied by the bir agra, to whom itzaded lahalacha kedas hamechaber, that the gra really leans to paskening like the mechaber, who's mekel on Shabbos of Tisha B'Av in all cases, and he leans to paskening like the mechaber, the tashmish is mutter. V'im kain yesh lismach lahakal al kol panim b'leil tefillah. So certainly we could be mekel if it happens to be leil tefillah. Now we go to Sif Chaf. Says the mechaber, ein she'ela shalom lechaveroi b'Tisha B'Av. On Tisha B'Av, as is the case in the Hilchas Avelus, you do not greet your friend. There's no she'ela shalom. If you meet somebody, you don't say shalom aleichem, and you don't say good morning, and according to most, you don't say good night. You don't greet somebody on Tisha B'Av. That's a sign of Avelus. V'hedyotais she'enam yoidim. If you have hedyotais, if you have simple people, amaratzim, who don't know this halacha, v'noisnim shalom, and they greet you. You meet somebody in the street and he's an amaretz, and he doesn't know that on Tisha B'Av there's a halacha that you don't greet somebody, and he sees you when he says shalom aleichem. Now what do? Says the Mechaber, Meshivim lahem b'safa rafa. You could respond to them in a low voice, or b'kovid roish, and with a very serious demeanor. So you don't want to spurn them. Somebody comes to you and says, Shalom Aleichem. You don't want to just look away and ignore the person. That would be insulting. You certainly don't want to bark at him and say, don't you know it's Tisha B'Av and there's no She'el Shalom? That's downright insulting. So the Mechaber says what you do is you respond quietly. Someone says, Shalom Aleichem. You know, Aleichem Shalom. In a very serious, downcast way, so that he should pick up, he should understand, oh, it's Tisha B'Av. Says the Chavetz Chaim in Ois Cotton Mem Aleph, Ein She'ela Shalom, V'hu Adin Loima Loi Tzafra Tova Nami Oser. It's also forbidden to say good morning. And Samach Reinim Amatir is saying good night for some reason. According to most contemporary poskim, it seems that good night is also improper. Believe it or not, the poskim write that it's mutter to wish somebody mazel tov on Tisha B'Av. So if you know somebody just married off a relative, or somebody had a baby and you see them on Tisha B'Av, you would think if you're not allowed to say good morning, you're certainly not allowed to say mazel tov. But that's not true, because you have to follow the lead of halacha. And the Mechaber says, Ein she'ela shalom. What you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to greet somebody. Saying mazel tov is not a greeting. That's not what it is. You're giving him a bracha. You're wishing him mazel tov because of a simcha that he made. We don't find that that's usher. So the contemporary poskim write that to say mazel tov is actually mutter. Continues the Chavetz Chaim here in Ois Cotton Mem Aleph. You're also not permitted to send somebody a gift on Tisha B'Av. Ois Cotton Mem Beis, L'chaveroi b'Tisha B'Av, we don't greet a friend on Tisha B'Av. Ula Ama Oretz, and the Mechaber brought down the case, what do you do if somebody greets you, how do you respond? Says the Mishnah Berurah over here, Ula Ama Oretz, if you're dealing with an Amoritz, Toiv, it would be good, Shoyoidi Aloi, Shahayim Aser Litain Shalom. You could explain to him, listen, today is a day when it's Aser, when you're not allowed to greet somebody. But whatever you do, you should make sure that there's no Eva. There shouldn't be any hard feelings between people. It's the last thing we want on Tisha B'Av. We know that on Tisha B'Av, one of the problems of the Churban is sinas chinam. So certainly we don't want to do something to offend somebody that's going to increase kitata, it's going to increase ill feelings between Yidden. Certainly we don't want Eva. Now we go to Sif Chaf Aleph, says the Mechaber. Yesh mi she'omer, there are those that say shelo yelech v'yitayel bashuk, that Tisha B'Av afternoon is not a time for going out and going, for a spazier, going for a walk in the street. Kedei shelo yavai lidei schok v'kalus v'hitol. We don't want to do anything that could bring to laughter, lightheadedness, silliness, joking around. We want to strive to maintain the solemnity of the day, the sadness of the day, the serious of the day. Going for a walk is very relaxing. You go for a walk with a friend, you start schmoozing, you talk about all sorts of things, and that could change the whole demeanor of the day, and we don't want to do that. Says the Mechaber Weiter in Sivchav Beis. Mokaim shenagu lasois melacha b'Tisha B'Av oisin, in a locale where the custom is to be matir, melacha, to allow work to be done on Tisha B'Av, oisin, you may perform melacha. B'mokaim shenagu shaloi lasois, in a locale where they have the minig that people do not do work on Tisha B'Av, ein oisin, that we do not do work. And it doesn't matter where it is, Talmidei Chachamim should not be oisik b'malacha. Talmidei Chachamim should not do work on Tisha B'Av. At least Talmidei Chachamim should have an appreciation of what it means, the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. They, of all people, should have an appreciation for it. They should have the seriousness of the day, and they certainly should not engage in work. And continues the Mechaber, and anybody who wants to consider himself a Talmud Chacham in the context of this malacha, of this halacha, and they want to be makpid not to do malacha on Tisha B'Av, oisa, you have the right to do that. We'll stop here for a second. Okay. So we have over here the Mechaber is telling us that whether or not malacha, engaging in work, going to work, and not only going to work, we'll have to define a little bit more closely. What does it mean, this Isser Malacha? Does it mean going to work, going to your place of business, opening up your shop, going to the office? Does it mean turning on lights? We call that Malacha when it comes to Shabbos. Does it mean writing? Does it mean cleaning the house? So the answer is that really when we talk about Malacha over here, we're sicher not going to aser more than what we aser on Chol Hamoed. But we're not talking about Malacha like on Shabbos. You're allowed to turn on a light. We're talking, okay, you know what, I'm getting ahead of myself. Why would you aser Malacha on Tisha B'Av? So let's take a look right away in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, in Ois Cotton Mem Gimel, Ein Oisin, in a locale where the minig is not to engage in Malacha on Tisha B'Av, Ein Oisin, you're not allowed to do Malacha on Tisha B'Av. Says the Mechaber, why would you not do Malacha on Tisha B'Av? Kedei shelo yasichu daitam me'avelus. The whole problem over here of Malacha on Tisha B'Av is we don't want to distract you from Avelus. We're supposed to be sitting and thinking about the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. We're supposed to be thinking about the Golus. So to engage in work, to engage in Malacha, that's going to distract us. Now the truth is that in the Rishonim, we find several different reasons for this Issa Malacha. This that the Chavetz Chaim brings down, that the Issa Malacha is because we don't want you to be distracted from Avelus. This can be found in Mishnayos Psachim Perek Dalid Mishnah Hey. The Rav, the Bar Tanura, says this. He says that the Issa Malacha on Tisha B'Av is Kedei shelo yasichu daita me'avelus. You should not be distracted from Avelus. The Trumas Hadeshen brings down a Rashi, and this is a Rashi that's not extant. We don't have this Rashi in Masechtas Tainus. But the Trumas Hadeshen brings down a Rashi, where Rashi says the reason for an Issa Malacha is because of Inui. We know that on Tisha B'Av, you're supposed to afflict yourself. The Chamisha Inuyim. We don't eat, we don't drink, we don't engage in marital relations, we don't do sicha, we don't wear leather shoes. Why? These are all forms of affliction. They're all forms of inui. Rashi says that to be mavatal from malacha is also inui. Now, why is bittul malacha considered inui? So on that, I've seen in the Achrayim a few different pshatim. One pshat is that simply people have, they say, get a job that you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life. Some people like the malacha that they do. So when they do malacha, they're happy. When they're not doing malacha, you have those people who sit at home when they don't have work, they don't know what to do with themselves. They sit at home and they're agitated and they're anxious, they don't know what to do with themselves. So Rashi, according to these Achrayim, says that it is a form of inui to be bottled from malacha on Tisha B'Av. Other Achrayim say that what Rashi means is, in order to maintain inui, when some people, when it's a fast day, they want to do something to pass the time. The fast is hard, but if I could do something to pass the time, what does that mean? It really means it's distracting you. So to engage in malacha is to do something that distracts you. Not only it distracts you from the avelus, like the Rav says, it distracts you from the inui. It distracts you from the tinus. It distracts you from the affliction. We don't want you to be distracted from that. You know what? We want you to suffer to a certain extent. Today is the one day a year that we sit and we actively are misabel and we mourn over the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. It's okay. You could be afflicted. So we don't want you to engage in malacha that's going to detract from the inui. So that's a second shot why we would have an Issa Malacha. Then we have a kolbai, a very interesting kolbai. The kolbai says, why there's an Issa Malacha on Tisha B'Av? Because if you're going to engage in work, it might take away your koiches, and then you might not be able to complete the fast. So we don't want you to engage in malacha. So here we have three reasons in the Rishonim why it would pass, why it's appropriate to have an Issa Malacha on Tisha B'Av. Now what the Mishnah Berurah said over here, and this is a Mishnah Berurah here, the Mishnah Berurah gives us that the reason is, like what the Rav says, Kedei shelo yasichu daita me'avelus. We don't want you to be distracted from the mourning over the Beis HaMikdash. So that's the rationale, that's the reason that we're gonna pay the most attention to, if you will. Because that's what the Mishnah Berurah tells us. Now, continues the Mishnah Berurah here in Ois Kat Mem Gimel. Umi Tamzeh, since this is the reason for the Issa Malacha, since the reason is that we don't want you to be distracted from the Avelos, therefore, Gam Balayla Asur B'Malacha. Therefore, even Tisha B'Av at night, there's also an Issa Malacha. Because Tisha B'Av by night, we also don't want you to be distracted from the Avelos. So there would be an Isser then as well. Miu, now here's a very important Mishnah Berurah. Miu, however, Kol malacha she'ein ba shihui shari. Any malacha that doesn't take up time is mutter. You want to turn on a light? There's no reason to ask it turning on a light. It's not Yom Tov today. We don't have an Isser malacha like we have on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. The point of the Isser malacha is we don't want to distract you from Avelus. Turning on the light is not going to distract you from Avelus. It's not going to change the solemnity of the day because you turned on a light. What malacha is aser, says the Mishnah Berurah? A malacha sheyesh by shihui. Malacha that's going to take time, that has an involvement. So, for example, the contemporary poskim say Tisha B'Av is not a time to say, oh, I have the afternoon off, I'll clean the house. And now you're going to start hustling and bustling, and you're going to go polish all the furniture. I haven't polished the furniture in a while. The second floor, the bedrooms, I haven't mopped the floors up there in a while. They only get a good sweeping. I'll go mop the floors. Maybe I'll clean out the garage. Maybe I'll clean out the attic. No, these are not things that are appropriate to be done on Tisha B'Av because they detract from the Avelus of the day. Okay, so the Mechaber told us that there's two different minhagim. There's a makom shenagu lasais malacha. There are places where the minig is to engage in malacha on Tisha B'Av, and then there are locales where the minig is shaloi lasais malacha. Where do we fall in? So if you take a look at the Biur Halacha, Dibur HaMaskil b'makom shenagu shaloi lasais. Says the Chavetz Chaim, u'kahayoim, nowadays minig kol Yisrael b'chol makom. The minig of Gans Klal Yisrael in all places is shaloi lasos, not to do malacha on Tisha B'Av. The kavanasai hu rak ad chatzos. How he brings this down from the Mata Yehuda, but he says his intent, he's speaking about Tisha B'Av until chatzos. So Tisha B'Av by day until chatzos. That's when we have a minig shaloi lasos malacha. Kidul kamei b'haga, like we're going to see shortly in the words of the Ramah. Now we go to Ois Kat Mem Daled in the Mishnah Berurah. So the Mechaber also told us that Talmidei Chachamim should be noyeg not to do malacha, no matter where they are. And the Mechaber said that even if you happen to be in a place where the minig is to do malacha, and even if you personally are not really a Talmid Chacham, you still could take on the minig not to do malacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Kat Mem Daled Oiseh, you could go ahead and take on that minig. V'loy mechsi ki yuara, and you don't look like somebody who's trying to take on the mantle of a chashuv a person. Mechsi ki yuara is sometimes a person takes on a chumrah that's not appropriate for him. Why are you taking on such a chumrah? Are you such a special person? There's an Indian, you're not supposed to be mechsi ki yura. Don't show yourself off that I'm so chashuv, The Mechaber says, Talmidei Chacham should be mevatel from halacha. So I'm going to make myself a Talmid Chacham. I'm going to be mevatel from halacha. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the Mechaber is telling you that in the context of this halacha, there is no such concern. If you want to be machmir not to do malacha on Tisha B'Av, even in a locale where most people do, you have the right, you could go ahead and you could take on that chumrah. Why? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, the Haroya Omer, because somebody who sees you not doing malacha will say, he's not going ahead and refraining from doing malacha because he's a frummy. He's refraining from doing malacha because he has no work today. That's why he's not doing malacha. So there's no problem of mechsi ki yuhura. Now let's go weiter in the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, second line from the bottom, even in a locale where the minig is not to do malacha, mutar al yedei eino Yehudi. You're allowed to get work accomplished through the agency of a non-Jew. So you want to send your Goyish employees to go open up the office and do work in the office, that's fine. Afilu bebeisai, even in your own house. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cotton Mem Vav, Mutter al Yidei Akum, you're allowed to get work accomplished through the agency of a non-Jew. Achein, however, there are limitations to this. Livnois binyan, if you, let's say you're building a house, you want to have non-Jewish contractors doing construction for you on Tisha B'Av, ta'av shemilsa, that's something which is very public, that the Chavetz Chaim says is Aser afilu al yidei akum, that would be forbidden even through a non-Jew. I think one of the reasons for this is, since it's Av Shemilsa, I don't know that this is a marital problem. What kind of marital? There's no marital. What's being done over here is mutter. You're allowed to do malacha through the agency of a non-Jew. So what's the problem? I think part of the problem is, again, it changes the ambiance of Tisha B'Av. Somebody walks down the street and he sees that, oh, Yankel's house, the construction is going on like normal. It changes the ambiance of Tisha B'Av. The ambiance of Tisha B'Av is supposed to be very somber and very solemn. And it's not supposed to be like any other weekday. It's not supposed to be a normal day. This construction activity in a Yiddish house makes Tisha B'Av look like an ordinary day. Another explanation that's brought down, but this doesn't explain what the Chavetz Chaim says over here, that the problem is Av Shemilsa. Another explanation that's brought down why construction activity is forbidden on Tisha B'Av is that Lamaisa, when somebody is building a house for you, when you walk by the house, you have simcha. You go ahead, oh wow, look what they did. Oh, they're putting in the plumbing fittings already. Oh, look, the sheetrock is going up. There's always a simcha when you have construction being done for you. It feels good to see that the job is getting done, and that's inappropriate for Tisha B'Av. But again, that would not explain what the Chavetz Chaim says over here, that the problem is the Av Shemilsa. Av Shemilsa is that it's very public. The explanation that I gave you explains the problem of Av Shemilsa. Now we go weiter in the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber, bottom line of Lamed Beis near the end. Uprakmatya, business, laharviach, to make money, or lehistaker, to make profit. In a locale where the minig is not to engage in work on Tisha B'Av, aser, it's forbidden. In places where the minig is that you do malacha on Tisha B'Av, mutter, it's permissible. However, you're supposed to be memayit in business activity. So if we're not talking about malacha, you have buying. You're an Amazon. You have an Amazon business. So you have buying and selling going on. Could you engage in buying and selling on Tisha B'Av to make a profit? So first the Mechaber ties that to the minig. Is it the minig? Do you live in a place where the minig is lasis malacha? Then it's okay. If the minig is shaloi lasis malacha, then it's aser. We, the Bir Halacha said, we're considered that the minig is shaloi lasis malacha. Then you should not engage in buying and selling, purchases and sales. Pragmatya. You don't do that for profit. And even if you're in a place where the minig is that you do malacha, you have to be memayit. You have to lessen your business activity. We learned already previously that really from the beginning of Rosh Chodesh Av, the beginning of the 9 days, you're supposed to be memayit in your business activity. Says the Ramah, Haggah, the Ramah says that this prohibition of doing work on Tisha B'Av only applies until Chatzos. And until Chatzos, we are machmir, and we don't engage in any kind of malacha that takes up time. That's what shihui means. It takes up time. I feel a ma'aseh hedyot, even if it's only a ma'aseh hedyot. It doesn't matter. If it takes up time, it distracts you. Aval davar she'en bo shiui, but something that doesn't take up time. Kigon adlakas neris. You want to light a candle. You want to turn on the light. That's not a malacha sheyesh bo shiui. That's not going to distract you from the avelos of Tisha B'Av. A keshira, or to tie knots. Even though those are things that are called malacha on Shabbos and Yom Tov, that's not also, because the whole problem is distracting you from the avelos of Tisha B'Av. Such activities do not distract you from the avelos of Tisha B'Av. Valach aloiv haparos, to milk cows, tov lases al yidei en Yehudi. The Ramah says the best thing would be to do it through a non-Jew, im efshir be'en Yehudi, if that is possible. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut mem zayin im efshar b'nachri v'im i efshar b'nachri. If you can't get it done by a non-Jew, mutar la'asoisa ba'atzma, it is permissible to do it by yourself, k'may b'chalamayid, like it is on chalamayid. V'ayin b'bir agrad shemitzadid lahakal tamid al yidei Yisrael ba'atzmai. The Gra seems to say that it's always mutar for a yid himself to go milk the cows. He doesn't need to employ a non-Jew to do that. Okay, let's go weiter. Sif Chav Gimel in the Mechaber. Umaleches davar ha'aved mutter. If you need to do malacha in order to avoid a financial loss, that is permissible. Kederech sha'amru b'chaylu shamayid, just like we said in chalamayid that you're allowed to do malacha in the case of a davar ha'aved. Aiskar memches davar ha'aved mutter im yirid oishayarais ba'im. If there's a marketplace opening up now on Tisha B'Av, or there are caravans that are coming and people are selling their wares, and they're going to be here now on Tisha B'Av, mutar liknais mehem al yedei akum, you could certainly purchase from them, have a non-Jew purchase it for you, avaloy al yedei atzmai, but you shouldn't do it on your own. The Mesiach Daitoi me'avelus. Shopping is not an activity for Tisha B'Av. The Tisha B'Av afternoon is not a time to go out and go shopping. It distracts you from the Avelus. Afilu kaidam chatzos. But it's mutter to make purchases from a caravan that's coming now on Tisha B'Av. Now is when they're here, and they're going to be here for today. So you can do it through a non-Jew. You can have a non-Jew purchase stuff for you. Afilu kaidam chatzos, even before chatzos. V'chol shekei limkar, and certainly you could take the opportunity if you want to sell wares, and now there's a traveling caravan came to town, and now you have a chance to make sales to them. You're allowed to do that, to have a davar avid, because that's already a davar avid. Commercial custom yeredes, so it should pay sivav le'inyan aval. Siv chav dalid, says the Mechaber, kala oisem malacha b'Tisha B'Av. Anybody who does engage in malacha on Tisha B'Av, Einoi raya siman bracha me oisa malacha. He's not going to see a siman bracha from that malacha. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut mem test. Kala oisa malacha. Says the Chavetz Chaim. Hainu afilu b'makom shenagu lasos. Even if you live in a locale where the minig is that people do engage in work on Tisha B'Av, va'afilu la'achar chatzos, and even if it's after chatzos, still, einoi raya siman bracha. You have to realize there's a difference between what's aser and what's mutter, and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. Even in a locale where the minig is lasais malacha, where the minig is that people do engage in work on Tisha B'Av, that doesn't mean that it's appropriate. If you're going to engage in malacha, and you're going to allow yourself to be distracted from the avelus over the Beis Hamikdash on Tisha B'Av, ein a roya siman bracha. Va'afilu lacha chatzos. Umashma b'Gemara, the implication of the lashon of the Gemara is, says the Chavetz Chaim, dafka kikishekeveya atzmai l'malacha, that this is only true if you make yourself get very involved in the malacha. Umesiach daitoi meha avelus, and you are distracted. You do remove your mind from the avelus of Tisha B'Av. That's when we say ein a roya siman bracha, because the lashon of the Gemara is kala oisik b'malacha. If somebody is oisik b'malacha ve'einoi misabel al Yerushalayim, and he's not in avelus over Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash. So the implication is, when is this a problem? When is it true that ein a roya siman bracha? If you're mamish kaveya yourself in the malacha, you go into the office and you're working like a normal day, and you're mesiach das from avelus, then ein a roya siman bracha. Val kain, and therefore says the Chavetz Chaim, av shemuta lisa v'lite nacha chatzos. Even though we've said that technically it's mutter to do business after chatzos, lo yimshaych ba'asakov. Don't get drawn after your business activity, kedei shelo yasiach daitoi min ha'avelus, so that you shouldn't be mesiach das from the avelus. There are those contemporary poskim that say, if you're in a situation where you are required to work on Tisha B'Av, and where it's mutter for you to work on Tisha B'Av, you know what you should do? You should say psukim of Eicha every now and then. You should recite kinnis to yourself. You should maybe listen to a good shmooze about the Churban. So make sure to keep your mind occupied with thoughts of Avelus on the Beis HaMikdash. The Mechaber said you don't see a Siman Bracha Me'oisa Malacha from that work. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and nun. What does that mean? You're not going to see a Siman Bracha from the money that you earn, from the work that you did. So if you went ahead and you did Malacha, if you went ahead and you painted a room for somebody, you're a painter, and you went to work and you did some painting for somebody and you made $250, you're not going to see a Siman Bracha from that $250. What does that mean? Well, it could be if you pay the auto mechanic for 2 tires with those $250, and they're supposed to be 50,000 mile tires, you might only get 10,000 miles, and then you'll get a nail in the sidewall that can't be repaired. But you're not going to see a Siman Bracha from that money. Finally, the final sif in this Siman, Sif Chavhei, Kol ha'oichel v'shoyse b'Tisha B'Av. Anybody who eats and drinks on Tisha B'Av, Einoi Raya B'Simchas Yerushalayim. He will not be Zoiche to see the rejoicing by the Geula Shlema, the rejoicing over Yerushalayim. V'chal ha'misabel on Yerushalayim, and somebody who does arouse himself to mourn over the loss of Yerushalayim in the Beis HaMikdash, Zoiche, he will merit V'Raya B'Simchasa, and he will be Zoiche to see the Simcha of the Geula, the Simcha of the Geula of Yerushalayim. Anybody who eats meat or drinks wine by the Suda HaMafsekes, the final meal before the onset of Tisha B'Av, Allah v'akasav omer, on him the pasuk says in Sefer Yecheskel, V'atihi avonoisam al atzmoisam. Their avera, their sin will be on their bones. The wine that they drank by the Suda Mafsekes, the meat that they ate by the Suda Mafsekes, it will penetrate their guf and it will stick to their bones. They won't be able to get rid of it. That avera is going to stick to them. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan on Aleph Kala Oichel V'Shoyse. Anyone who eats and drinks on Tisha B'Av, says the Chavetz Chaim, Afilu Uberes Oimenika. Even an expectant mother or a nursing mother. We said earlier in this Siman, in Sifhei, that on the other 3 of the 4 Tanesim, on Asar B'Tevis, and on Asar B'Tevis, and Shivasa B'Tammuz and Tzom Gedalia, an expectant mother and a nursing mother are not required to fast. But that's not true on Tisha B'Av. On Tisha B'Av, they are required to fast. Unless they're mitztares harbe, unless they're really suffering v'hayalachush l'sakana, and there's at least room to be concerned that they might come to a sakana. But like this, an expectant mother or a nursing mother, they're supposed to fast on Tisha B'Av. If they don't, if they eat and drink, says the Chavetz Chaim, then the words of this mechaber, the terrible words of this mechaber, that eina roya b'simchas Yerushalayim, that it applies to them as well. So for somebody to eat or drink on Tisha B'Av, they have to really be a chayla. They have to really be ill. They could be maybe a chayla she'ein by sakana, but they have to be ill. So afilu mu'beres abinika, oy she'ari anashim shehem chalushim b'tivan, or people who are just naturally weak, umitztarim me'atainus, and they suffer from the tainus. So somebody has a weak constitution, fasting is hard for him. So, okay, you don't go eat. It's supposed to be hard. You're fasting. If you're ill, if somebody is sick, that's a different story. But if you're not sick, just the fast is hard. Okay, so the fast is hard. Like the Chavetz Chaim says. At least one day during the year, the Beis HaMikdash is worthwhile. That at least one day during the year, you should suffer and you should be misabel over the churban. So that's not a reason to go eat and drink because the tinus is hard. Like the Chavetz Chaim says in the brackets, unless somebody is taka sick, like we said earlier in Siv B'Av, vayin sham b'hagah. In Siv B'Av, we said, okay, if he calls about she'elim tsar gadol lachash l'sakana, if somebody's taka tsar gadol, if somebody's presenting as being ill, and it's pasha a tsar gadol for him to fast, that's a different story. But if it's just, I'm not sick, I'm fine, just, fasting is hard for me. Okay, it's a fast day. It's Tisha B'Av, it's not supposed to be easy. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Shalom should send Yeshuas and Refuas and Parnasa to all those in need. The Rabban Shalom should bring us to a time of simcha. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.